Welcome, I'm Kinetic Symphony. This is Dave. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the supernatural. Case file number 1747, written by MonchichiSalt. Symbols in Flux and a Tattoo Paradox. My forum has a line of individual symbols. They represent a specific time in my life with people I was once very close to. We're still all friends, but you know how life can get in the way of frequent hangouts as we get older. And I just realized that the tattoo turns 10 in July, if that matters. Each of these symbols are plain black lines, nothing fancy. Think along the idea of a simple heart, square, circle kind of deal. There are more than 3 though. We each had the symbol that represents yourself colored in, and kept it very simple by going in order of age. The oldest has the first mark colored in, the next oldest has a second, third has a third, and so on. Our group had a wide age range, the oldest being 7 years senior to the next in line, the closest gap being 5 years apart. It's not like we're talking about a few months or a handful of years apart. I'm pretty damn confident in my own age, and where I am in the lineup. I'm not deep in the middle child zone either. The one that represents me, the only colored one, has changed location. So obviously, I made a few calls. No one else has noticed a change in theirs. Sent out a picture of mine. The person I swapped with reports their color ink faded out within the last few years. They only have the black lines. Cue the confusion amongst the group. It's agreed that this would have been noticed the day we all got them, or at some point over the last decade. My friends are not as open to this sort of subject, so it's just been left at how weird we never realized. This would not be my first glitch, nor will it be the first time I would rather believe my memory is slipping. However, just like the glitch that got me believing, it feels like I have witnesses. Why are they all just as confused if it was only my memory? And that's what brings me here to share it. Case file number 1747. Symbols in Flux and a Tattoo Paradox. Okay, so that's a really cool concept for tattoos, having them with all your friends and only coloring one symbol based on your age in the group. Really interesting idea. Even though I'm not really a tattoo guy. Mainly it's just a needle. I don't like any sort of needle. If you see an animation of how tattoos are actually encoded or the ink pushed into your skin, that's crazy. No thanks. I'd get a fake tattoo that just fades away, sure. But as you say, your memory of it, with the memory of everyone else, matching yours, is concrete evidence that this really was a simulation glitch. Because I think correcting it would lead to even more questions than if it wasn't corrected. Especially after the fact, after your friends saw it. Maybe if they got to the error before you showed your friends, then it would have been fixed permanently. But because you got to your friends first, they're just going to leave it like that, never fix it. Case file number 1748, written by Vaineglorie. Omen at dawn, the Spirit of St. John? On December 22nd, 2022, at approximately 7 a.m., my wife heard 3 loud knocks that woke her up. Note, it was also still pitch black night at this time. They were in a set rhythm and sounded like they came from the side of our house, not our door. She heard the same 3 knocks again, loud and hard, and called me on my phone. I was sleeping downstairs because I had this pain that was so bad I couldn't sleep in the bed comfortably. The downstairs had one huge window on the back wall, looking out in the backyard, and another on the opposite wall looking into the front yard and porch where the door is. She asked me if I had heard the knocking, and I said no. My dog hadn't reacted either, and she is pretty sensitive to these things. I told her she must have heard the pipes or something, and we hung up. Less than a minute after we hung up, I heard the knocking too. Loud and heavy, and 3 distinct knocks. Again, I was in the living room on the couch with the ability to see into both yards and see the front door. The knocks didn't sound like they came from the front door, but still looking out at the door, no one was there. This time my dog did react though, and honestly, the knocks terrified the crap out of me. My wife and I ran outside to try to find the source. Even brought my dog to see if she'd chase the source. Nothing. The street was empty and quiet, and my dog picked up no trace of something. We've never heard knocking like that since. Now the reason I remember the date clearly is because the next day I went to the hospital for my pain, had emergency surgery at 1 a.m. on Christmas Eve to drain an infected cyst that was causing me to go septic. there's some superstitions, particularly in Ireland, and we live in Northern Ireland, where 3 knocks and no one at the door signifies a death in the family. I swear we were being warned my death was coming if we didn't act. Case on to file 1748. Omen at dawn, the spirit of St. John? Yeah, it just feels like an echo repeating, which I think is what spirits are. They're tethered by trauma or longing for something. Maybe it was the home where you're at now belonged to this person's long-lost love. Maybe they died. Maybe they got married and never consummated the marriage. That would be traumatic, I would say. A lot of potential catalysts for that, but yeah. My guess is probably on the same day every year, or every 10 years on a certain repeating pattern of time, you're going to hear a knock again. Case file number 1749, written by InsertCoinsToBegin. Boots on the floor, turning a glitch so hardcore. This happened about 15 years ago, at a ranch-style house in the middle of the country, surrounded by farmland and sparsely spaced houses. I haven't talked to my dad in years, and while he claimed to be religious, he more so thought he was than him actually being religious. I have been a very headstrong skeptic, and was a typical teenage atheist and still am an atheist. But I have become more spiritual in my late 20s and 30s. The story. My dad and I were home, and he was in his office room with the radio very loud, and I was in the living room working on my college work. My dad can't hear very well at all. However, we both heard the kitchen door open with a pop, squeaking kind of sound, which was a typical sound when opened. Work boots stomping on the kitchen floor. We all wore work boots because we were outside laborers and walked heavy. And the sound of both the work boots being taken off and being dropped on the kitchen floor, which is what we, my dad, little brother and I, did, and a very common noise. My dad and I both heard it and figured it was my little brother coming home. However, the outside free-roaming dogs hadn't barked, and the driveway alarms didn't go off. Maybe the dogs were out roaming, or maybe the driveway didn't pick up the car. How we tried to rationalize it. I called my little brother, and he was 45 minutes away? My dad and I searched the outside and the entire house, ground floor and basement. Every room. It was just us. I'm not religious, but something isn't right about that house. At all. And a decade plus later, my little brother still swears it wasn't him. He has stories about seeing shadow people for years and something following him on and in his car. And many, many more stories. My eyes watered, again, as I edited this, and I got goosebumps typing this all these years later. Many, many weird or questionable things happened in that house. My older sister swears she saw what she thought was my little brother when he was just a toddler. Something during the middle of the night where she got up, she thought she saw my little brother in the hallway by the bathroom. It wasn't my little brother. She locked herself in the bathroom and wouldn't come out, until someone woke up and knocked on the door. This was 20 plus years ago, and eventually, as she got older, she wouldn't talk about it anymore. But for the longest time, when she asked about the story, she said the same thing. Case on to file 1749. Boots on the floor, turning a glitch so hardcore. Yeah, so I'm right there with you, feeling those emotions you described, tearing up writing it, because it's so unusual. And it is experiencing a soul separation, which in my view is what happened. Your brother's soul detached from his body, part of it at least, and projected forward. And you simply were interacting with that soul for a bit. Curious though that the dogs didn't detect this soul. Maybe it's because the soul had no scent. And of course, the alarm wouldn't trigger for the driveway because your brother didn't come back in a car the first time. Interesting. Now time for the joke of the day. At a man's funeral, the widow asked if anyone would like to say a word. The first person stands up and says, "Plethora." The widow says, "Thank you, that means a lot." The next person stands up and says, "Earth." The widow says, "Thank you, that means the world." The next person stands up and says, "Watering hole." A bit confused, the widow says, "I know you meant well." The next person stands up and says, "Totality." The widow says, "Thank you, that means everything." The next person stands up and says, "Dynamite." The widow says, "Thank you, that's powerful stuff." The next person stands up and says, "Nostalgia." The widow says, "Thank you, that's a loving memory." The next person stands up and says, "Embrace." The widow says, "Thank you, that's touching." The next person stands up and says, "Measurement." The widow says, "Thank you, that means so much." The next person stands up and says, "Incomprehensible." The widow says, "Thank you, that means more than you can imagine." The next person stands up and says, "Bargain." The widow says, "Thank you, that means a great deal." The next person stands up and says, "Beer." The widow says, "Thank you, he would have loved that." This one's a thinker. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.